Hey everybody, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's your boy Josh coming at you again, putting out a new video for the week. And I'm really excited to continue this, I guess you could call it another series that I've been doing, where really and truly I'm just going through the history of the church, kind of like the timeline of Christianity. And last week, if you tuned in, you saw where I kind of went through Christianity before Christ, which if you didn't tune in, pretty much I can sum it up by saying it was Jews. You know, you can go back and look at the ancient Israelite religion and the Jewish people and just read the Old Testament, learn about Abraham and Moses, Isaac, Jacob, David, all these people, and that can kind of give you an idea of what Christianity looked like before Jesus came along. And with that pertaining so much to Israel, I wanted to take the opportunity, guys, just to encourage you to pray for the situation that's going on in Israel. There's a lot of death happening, and they need all the prayers they can get. Both the Israelis and the people of Palestine, they all need prayers. You know, put yourself in that situation. You know, what if your loved ones, were dying and your children were getting beheaded? How would you feel? And they just need prayer. Everyone involved, and the killing just needs to stop. And I pray that it does. But regardless, I think the main prayer should always be for God to somehow, get the glory and make good come out of it, one way or the other. He is sovereign. He knows what he is doing. He is in control. And it's really sad to see what's happening. It's sad to see what happens when a people rebel against God. But with that being said, today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at Christianity kind of during the life and after the death of Jesus Christ, and kind of how it evolved over the years. And first I want to say the word church comes from the Greek word ecclesia, which comes from two words, ek, which means out of, and ecclesia, which means to call. So ecclesia simply means the called out ones. The church is in the world, but not of it. We are called out. We are called to be different than the rest of the world. So with that being said, now that we know what the word church means, now let's take a look at the church. The early church, which is going to be from the death of Christ to 325 AD. This would have been when, obviously Jesus has lived his life. He has fulfilled his purpose of being crucified on the cross, taking our place, absorbing the wrath of all sin ever, making salvation possible for us. And now his apostles were writing letters. This is when Paul would have been writing, his letters to the churches of Corinth, and Timothy was written, and most of the New Testament was written during this time period. This was to preserve the teachings of Jesus and his apostles, and also to form correct doctrine. I think some people kind of disregard doctrine nowadays. They always talk about, no religion, just relationship. Well, you need both. You need the law and you need relationship. You need both. When Jesus said that he was returning, the apostles thought that it would be soon, that he was going to be returning soon. But over time it became clear to them that he wasn't going to be returning immediately. So they made sure to preserve the teachings and the doctrine of Christ, the same doctrines that he taught them they made sure to preserve and teach to other people. This was also the greatest persecution period for the church. There were many martyrs. In the book of Acts, you read about Stephen. He was the very first martyr. You look at how Peter and all of them just about died a very painful death. They lived, honestly, by our standards, very miserable lives. None of them you would look at and say, wow, he lived a very prosperous life, in terms of materialistic things. I don't think they were advocates or believers in the prosperity gospel, but they believed in the gospel. They believed in the Christ. And there were many people who were burned, they were crucified, they were hung, they were eaten by dogs, they were eaten alive, and they were beheaded. There were a lot of people that happened to. Some of the key people of this period would have been the Emperor Nero, which was the one that had people burned, Justin Martyr, Polycarp, Ignatius. Those would have been some of the key people. Obviously, you have your, Peter's, Paul's, Timothy's. This was a very long stretch of time, and there was a lot of suffering that was endured by believers during this time period. But then came the establishment of Christianity in 325 AD through 590 AD. This is when the Roman Emperor Constantine was converted. He was a pagan, and he claimed to have a vision from God telling him to use Christian tactics to win a battle, and as a result he was converted. He no longer persecuted Christians. In 313 AD, the edict to end persecution on Christianity was established by Constantine. Around 380 or 390 AD, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire under another emperor named Theodosius. There was also a lot of false doctrine that began spreading, because at this point the apostles are gone, and there's not as many, people. By this point there's no one, around that was around when Jesus was there, So there's no one now. Some people are starting to doubt. Some people are starting to kind of write it off again, probably. Certainly there's a ton of people who do it now because they've never physically seen Jesus. They've never physically seen God. So they find it hard to believe in something that they've never seen. The Council of Nicaea formed in an effort to promote unity within Christianity and to know what was truth and what was not. But out of these councils came creeds, which were short writings that expressed the core beliefs of Christianity. For example, you had the Apostle Creed, right? Key people during this period was Augustine, Jerome, and that leads us to the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. By this point, Christianity is the primary religion of Rome, and the rise of the Roman Catholic Church was from 590 to 1517 AD. Out of the RCC came the papacy, which were, just the line of popes, Also, it was monasticism, which was the rise of monks, or people who dedicated their entire lives to serving God. This was also a time period that saw the rise of Islam, and this was also a time period where Christian missionaries were reaching Asia and Africa and Europe, including England, France, Germany, and so on. This was also when the idea of scholasticism was introduced. Many theologians began to write great works about Christian doctrine that are still used in reference today, which, as the Roman Church continued to grow, the more there were the more false doctrine began to take over. I mentioned earlier that there was some false doctrine that began to spread, but there was several things that was wrong and is wrong with Catholicism. I could do another video about that, breaking down Catholicism and kind of what they believe and whatnot. And as a matter of fact, I'll probably do that here soon. But next, I want to transition into the Protestant Reformation, which was 1517 AD through 1648 AD, which was primarily led by a man by the name of Martin Luther. In 1517, Martin Luther broke away from the Catholic Church. He protested against some of the Catholic Church's teachings, mainly the sale of indulgences, which, if you don't know, Catholics believe in a place called purgatory, which is a kind of an in-between place besides heaven or hell, where you can get purged of your sin and go to heaven regardless. Okay, the Catholics were convincing people to give their money to the church if they had a loved one who died, and maybe they weren't sure that they were, going to heaven. And the Catholics would say, if you give us your money, we can pray over this dead person, and they might get purged of their sins and go to heaven. And they were kind of scamming people, kind of like how, faith healers and prosperity teachers do now. They'll say stuff like this: give this seed, plant this seed, and God will multiply it. And all it is, guys, it's manipulation to try to get your money. And it's really sad. And it's the same reason that Jesus was flipping over tables in the temple. But Martin Luther had an issue with this, because he believed that salvation is by grace through faith alone. You can't buy your salvation. You can't buy your sins to be washed away. It's something that Jesus Christ did. It's something that you and I are incapable of doing. Salvation is something that has nothing to do with us. And that's something that Martin Luther believed. And it's something that the Catholics don't. They teach faith plus works. Right. So if you take part of the sacraments, if you take part of communion, if you get sprinkled with water, if you do all the right things, there's this perfect formula where you can be saved. And that's not really the case. There's nothing that we could do to ever earn our salvation. But, the interesting thing is, Martin Luther, he didn't want to begin his own religion. He wanted to reform the Catholic Church. So, there was still a lot of aspects of Catholicism mixed in with Martin Luther's beliefs. But some of you, if you paid attention in school, may remember that Martin Luther wrote a document entitled the 95 Thesis, in which he voiced his disagreement with the Catholic Church. He nailed that document to the Castle Church in Germany, which started the Protestant Reformation. People followed him in agreement with him, and that was now the separation between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Also, something very interesting to note here is the printing press became popular. So the 95 Thesis began spreading, which led to many different denominations being formed. There was a slow movement away from organized religion and toward individual faith. And in 1611 AD, the King James Bible was written, which was the most popular version of the Bible for the next 300 years. The key people to remember in this is Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Jacobus Arminius. This was also remember those names, because if they don't come back up in this video, they will come up in other videos. Because, I've talked about Calvinism and Arminianism. John Calvin was pretty much the guy that got Calvinism rolling. Jacobus Arminius for Arminianism. This is also the Enlightenment period to the modern church, which was 1648 AD to the present. During the late 17th century is what was called the Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason. Individualism was big here, which meant you had no attachment to a church or to a religion. This was also kind of when reason and skepticism became really big. People wanted proof that it's true, and they based their beliefs on reasoning. And then science saw a big boom in this period. If it can't be proven with science, then somehow it's the Bible that is wrong. It's based on your own personal experience, relationship, or knowledge of God, which is flawed because we are flawed. This was also time period for the Great Awakening, which was a series of revivals that spread across the American colonies during the 1730s and the 1740s. The Great Awakening was kind of designed to get people excited about their faith again, despite the Enlightenment. This was also kind of when new denominations were formed. You started to see Baptist and Lutherans, Methodist, Episcopal, Presbyterians, Charismatic, Pentecostals. All these things started popping up. Key people from this period, which is a very long period, Isaac Newton, George Whitefield, John Wesley, Hudson Taylor, C.H. Spurgeon, D.L. Moody, and Billy Graham, just to name a few. But this is kind of where we get into the denominations, So the Protestant Reformation is really how the church, the modern day American church, was formed. At first it was just Catholicism. Or let me say this, primarily Catholicism. And pretty much every denomination that we have is a descendant, I guess you could say, of Catholicism. It was Martin Luther, who was a former Catholic monk, who started the Protestant Reformation. And when you talk to a Lutheran, they still hold true to a good bit of the Catholic traditions and the Catholic beliefs. To where if you talk to, a Baptist or a Pentecostal, not so much. And so this video was kind of just timelining. Last week I did before Christ. Today I'm doing from Christ to modern day. Next week I'm probably going to start breaking down each denomination and kind of just highlighting on what they believe. I may do multiple in the same video. I may do just one at a time. I don't really know how long it'll take for me to break down each one. I've really only been a part of, I guess technically 3, non-denominational, Pentecostal, and Baptist. So I have a lot to learn still. I don't really know a whole lot about Methodist or Presbyterian, and I'm still learning a lot about Baptist. I know one pretty well because I was one for probably about 20 years, but that's another story for another time. Thank you so much for tuning in. I pray this video was informative. There's so many videos out there that you could watch to tell you this information, and probably in a lot shorter of a time frame. Right now as of recording, I'm at 21 minutes and 41 seconds. I haven't edited yet though, so who knows. But you could probably watch a shorter video get better information. Who knows? I don't know. But my goal into this is just kind of giving you insight on where did we come from? How did we get to where we are today in America and in the world? How did Christians evolve into what they are today? And I just wanted to set the foundation, of going way back into the beginning and going back into more recent but also distant times. And now I'm going to transition into what we have in modern times with the different denominations. So again, guys, I hope this video was informative. Guys, don't forget to pray for Israel. Don't forget to pray for the people over there fighting in this war for both sides. They need prayer. And I will be praying for you guys. And I will let you go on about your day. It was a pleasure doing this. And guys, until next time, Josh out.